Well, hello there. My name is Parallax Abstraction, Human Retro Relations, and I'm here to talk to you today about this wonderful title for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System called Super Star Wars. It is a retelling of a fantastic journey between two robotic friends as they assist their human companions to rid the galaxy of evil for the benefit of everyone. I hope you enjoy. Hey guys, how's it going? Sorry, that was my god-awful C-3PO impression. So yes, a new Star Wars movie is upon us. I don't know if you guys heard that or not. It hasn't really been well communicated. I'm not sure if you know about that. But yeah, to take advantage of this perfect time for YouTube keyword optimization, I am decided to take a look at my first ever Star Wars game. So there are actually quite a few Star Wars games out there. I don't know if you've noticed that either. And they range in quality. There's a lot of really, really good ones, and there's some awful ones too. This is one I actually didn't have much experience with before now, but it's one that is very widely regarded. So this is Super Star Wars for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. This is actually the PlayStation 4 re-release that just came out recently. It was actually a pack-in with Star Wars Battlefront, but you can buy it on its own now for $10, which is a little ridiculous. This is actually the first in a series of 3 Super Star Wars games that came out on the Super Nintendo. They were developed by a company called Sculptured Software, which is no longer with us, but who actually had a pretty good reputation. They did a lot of arcade conversions and some other stuff like that, and this is a very, very well-regarded Star Wars game, actually. A lot of people say this is one of the better ones of its day. And I hadn't played it much, so we'll figure we'll check it out. This is the only one that's out on the PlayStation 4, so the other 2 games in the series are not out, which is kind of unfortunate. And yeah, $10 is a lot to ask for one retro game, but so here's the options. I always like to talk about these retro sort of updates and how they are. So this was done by a company called Code Mystics, which was formed by some some former Digital Eclipse guys, and this they are a company that specializes in converting old games to modern systems, and they've done some good work. I played some of their King of Fighters conversions on the PC, and they're pretty good. So, what do you get for options in here? Sadly, not very much for your $10. So there's multiple borders you can do. So we got Art A, Art B, Fill, and Black. So I'll go over these really quick. So Art A is, as you can see here, the game is in this sort of boxed window with borders on all 4 sides. So this is the sort of original resolution, optimal way to play if you want the best visual quality, and you get this border around it, which actually looks not so bad. It's not too intrusive. Art B is it stretches it on the vertical to fill in the top and bottom bars and stretches it to the side to compensate. This still looks pretty good, and you get more real estate, so this is how I like to play. Fill does a horrible stretch job where it makes everything look super wide but takes up the screen. This game does not have an anamorphic stretch, so it does not actually fill it in a way that makes it look, proportionally equal. Everything looks stretched. This is a terrible way to play it. And then you have Black, which is the Art B enlarged size but with no borders on it. Some people, if you don't want the border, you can do that, but kind of a shame you have to have it stretch a bit if you want that. So this is the way I've been playing it. You have 3 filters as well. So this is the default one, which is Scanline, which probably represents the Super Nintendo version most accurately. I don't like it. It looks dim because, well, there's scan lines in it. Every second line is black, so I'm not a big fan of that. There's Crisp, which looks the most modern. It's the brightest. This is what I like. Why this is not the default, I couldn't tell you. And then there's Smooth, which looks like I need glasses. It's blurry. Not a fan. You do have as well the ability to rebind your controls, which is really cool. A lot of game packages, retro game packages, don't let you do that. So that's nice. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen more options in here, because $10 is insanely expensive for one retro game. That's higher than Wii Virtual Console prices, which I've already railed on before. So anyway, there's also online leaderboards in this, which is kind of cool, but they're very, very basic. So you can see your friends' scores. I have no friends who are playing this game, or the worldwide scores for each difficulty level. But really, really stupid thing, you can't see where your own score is. So most games like this have an option where you can just zoom to your own score. Can't in here. That's ridiculous. I don't understand why that would be the case, but yeah, you cannot see your own score in this, which I don't understand at all. Maybe my score hasn't actually been filed to the leaderboard because I haven't actually completed the game yet. Based on some of these scores, it looks like you might actually have to fully complete the game beforehand. I'm not sure. That's not been made clear. So, leaderboard integration is nice, but also not as good as it could be. This game does have save and load states as well, though you can't get to that from the main menu. So, I will show you that once we get to that point here. So, alright, so that's the basics of the port. So, let's talk about the game. So why is this game very well regarded? Well, it is a bit of a technical showpiece for the Super Nintendo for sure. This came out fairly early in the Super Nintendo's life cycle, and graphics and sound-wise, it looks really, really impressive. I mean, look at this. We got the original Star Wars crawl right here. Take a look at this. It's pretty impressive. They have really good Nintendo sort of MIDI mod versions of the original soundtrack music, and it actually is pretty faithfully reproduced. And yeah, the graphics and animation are really, really impressive, and we're going to skip this here because it's literally the New Hope text crawl. And they do a really good job of that, and what's interesting about this is people remember this fondly because it was not only a quality movie tie-in game, which were few and far between, even to this day, but it actually follows the stories of the films pretty closely, with some creative liberties taken here and there, like, for example, here we're in the Dune Sea on Tatooine, and there's Minox, which, no, this is not where Minox showed up in the films, but, you know, little things like that. But beyond that, it actually follows the story a fair bit. There's little cutscenes in this game that use actual dialogue from the films, actually has characters in it, and you actually progress through elements of the story, including expansion of elements that you wouldn't have seen in the films, like you actually have to fight your way into the Jawa sandcrawler and things like that in this, which is really, really neat, and that's why people liked it, is it was actually fairly faithful, and they did a good job translating the events of actual movies into a game in a way that didn't feel shoehorned in or tacked on. It actually felt legitimate. There's also multiple gameplay elements in this, which I think is really cool. So this is just sort of straight up platforming combat here. These are principally platformer games. But there's also interesting driving sequences that make very heavy use of the Super Nintendo's Mode 7 capabilities, and there is actual just straight-up platforming, less combat and more actual platforming. Now, you may have seen in the beginning there that I'm playing this game on easy. Well, yeah, here's the rub with this. This game, though fondly regarded, is unbelievably hard, and it's frankly pretty unfair in places. A lot of its challenge is created by being cheap. Now, that's not something that's uncommon in old-school platformer titles. The thing with old-school platformer games, right, is that they were usually fairly short in reality. They didn't actually have a lot of content in them, and the way they gave you a lot of hours out of them in order to be a good value proposition was that they were very, very hard. And they rewarded practice and iterative skill expansion, and that's sort of how you got through them and did a good and eventually finished them. This is very much like that, but this takes it to the next level. This is like, the majority of this game is like ending of Castlevania 3 hard. Like, it's that level of cheap and mean. Now, a lot of people remember it fondly for that, and I can understand why. If I was younger and had more of a tolerance for ridiculously tough games like this, I would probably be one of those people. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm getting old, and I don't need games to hold my hand necessarily, but I don't like games that feel like they're purposely being unfair, and this one definitely does in places. So the first boss here is the Sarlacc pit monster, which is on Tatooine, but also not in the first movie. So yeah, even this boss fight here has some elements that are really cheap in it. I mean, you can see these things it's throwing at me, but also, when it changes position, you get very, very little notice of where it's coming out, and if you don't move quickly enough, its sort of arms will come towards you, which it also didn't have arms in the film, and will do a ridiculous amount of damage to you, and if you get trapped in a corner, you can't avoid it. And where this game gets absolutely insane is the checkpointing. The checkpoints in this game are just cruel. You will have sections where in later levels where you might either, if you die once, you may have to do entire levels over again, or if you die in, say, a boss fight, you have to do like half of a very difficult level or more over again. It's really that bad. I almost died there. So we got him. And as usual, like most platformers, this has time and lives, and you'll get bonuses for having extra ones. One interesting thing about this is that if you run out the clock, you don't actually die. The clock is purely used for score bonus, so you're not actually under time pressure, which I really like. So you can see here's a cutscene. You recognize a lot of this dialogue and stuff. Really neat, and it's following the films, which is really interesting. Most movie tie-in games often very loosely follow the films they are portraying, and the reason for that. So here's a driving sequence. This is where we're actually trying to get to the Jawa cruiser to do stuff with. So this is very interesting. This almost plays kind of like a Space Harrier or something, I suppose. So you can fire, you do have unlimited shots, which is nice. You have to take these enemies out, and you also, if you press the X button on the PlayStation controller, you activate these jets, and the jets are what allow you to actually turn and change your perspective. And so the jets actually have fuel, which you can also pick up in this level, and obviously they'll help get you through the level more quickly. It's interesting, but you got to be careful, because you'll not only take a lot of damage. There's some jet fuel there. You'll not only take a lot of damage from running into enemies, but you see there those pits. If you go over that, will hurt you as well. So you really don't want to go too fast, because if you are too quick, you can get yourself kind of screwed here, which I have done in the past. So we're going to take our time here a little bit. But what you see, the problem that most movie tie-in games have, and this is why the majority of them suck, is that they're developed in concert with the movie. And a lot of times, the people developing a movie tie-in game don't know a lot about what the movie is. They may get some core plot points, but a lot of them don't get to see the script or anything like that. And they don't get kept up to date on, because movies change a lot in the process of production, and they don't necessarily get kept up on that. So a lot of movie tie-in games look very loosely related to the movies, because they're usually designed to ship the same time the movie does. And if the developers just didn't have access to the creative elements of the films, which studios usually don't want because they want to avoid leaks, it's a pain, because the game may not have anything to do with the movie as a result of that. And people go, well, this kind of sucks. Other than having the name, this has nothing to do with it. These games came out in the 90s, so they came out so long after the original films that obviously... So here we go. Now we're outside the Sandcrawler, and you're going to see some platforming here. These games came out so long after the movies that they actually knew everything about them. So they were able to really take their time, and they had the original source material to work with, and was able to really do a nice creative interpretation of the original work. That's something that you rarely see. And truth be told, there are few movies where you could actually pull that off effectively than Star Wars, because very rarely does a movie tie-in game come out long after a movie and have anyone care about it, unless it is a very big sort of cult classic film. And this is friggin' Star Wars. How much more cult classic do you want, right? And that's sort of how they... this is the best blaster upgrade. So you can upgrade your weapon, as you can see. You start with a normal blaster, and then you can upgrade to a flame gun, a seeker gun, and eventually I believe it's a plasma gun, which I don't believe are represented in the film. But funny enough, this is not the highest upgrade level, the seeker, but it's actually the one I prefer, because, well, the bullets actually track towards enemies. The highest level, the bullets are much more powerful, but they don't actually lock onto enemies. So as you can see here, we have some platforming we have to do. The platforming in this game is very, very frustrating, because it is both very difficult, and the one problem that I have with this game is the control response is not great. And I have actually gone back and checked the original Super Nintendo version. This is not a problem with the PlayStation conversion. This is the way the game was originally designed. So for whatever reason, every button in this game has a rapid fire option. Now you may think that's useful for things like, firing the gun. Obviously, it's sort of firing. He's just dumping this thing, which is nice. But the problem is they put that function on every button, including jump. So you see, I'm not pressing the button right now, I'm just holding it down. And when you're trying to do precise jumps, if you don't time it exactly right, you can kind of get yourself screwed, because as soon as Luke touches the ground again, he will do another jump. And if that's not what you wanted, in precise situations like this, you can find yourself screwing up a lengthy platforming section. And some of the platform sections later in the game actually have basically insta-death situations, where if you miss a jump, you're screwed, and you may have to go back to a long checkpoint further back, and that's kind of crappy. So you can scroll up and down a little bit here too, which is nice. So I don't know why the game was designed that way, but the Super Nintendo version was the same way. So it creates an extra element of challenge, but again, it's cheap and mean, and for no real good reason. I'm not really a fan of that, if you ask me. You can also jump higher by holding down the jump, by holding down the up button while you jump, so you can actually get a higher jump on that. So we're going to get into the sand crawler soon here. I am going to show you guys the save and load function shortly. I have a game saved a little bit further along, basically right before the boss of this level. So I'll show you guys that after. Alright, so this is done. So the progression is really interesting, and the production values are off the chart, but as a platformer, to me, this just feels unnecessarily cheap and cruel. Which is too bad. Like, I have no problem with this game being hard, but I want it to be hard just because it's challenging, not because it feels like the controls are fighting you. And in many places, it really does. There are also situations in this where the levels are designed in such a way that you'll get killed very quickly for means that you had no way to find out. So, for example, like you can move the screen around here a little bit to see where some of the enemies are, but sometimes they'll spawn in after you pull off a jump. Oh yeah, so this is a thermal detonator. So a thermal detonator is just, you didn't see it work there, but a thermal detonator is just a screen clearing option. So yes, here's the rapid ion gun. This is also handy. I think this is actually the second biggest upgrade. The bullets don't seek, but they bounce off walls, which can be very, very helpful. But I still like the seeker thing more. So sometimes enemies will spawn in when you can't see them, which is a bummer. There's a time bonus thing there too. Also, there will be situations where you'll have to make a big jump and won't necessarily be able to see either where you're going to land or what the environment will do when you land. So there's a section in this level where if you make a jump and miss it, you'll actually land in something that will kill you instantly. So you'll basically land in an insta-death situation. There's no way you would know that until you tried it and messed it up. And if you make the jump and don't jump in a certain direction, you will mess it up. So the vast majority of people will their first time out. Then you have to go back to a checkpoint several minutes ahead of time, and if you were on your last life, well, screw you. And that's the other thing with this game. This game has, by default, this game has no saving and not even passwords. So if you end up dying and running out of continues, which you get 3 continues by default, you get to do the whole game over again. And given how or for that matter, if you even turn it off, you get to do the whole game over again. And given how brutal this game is, that's, again, petty and mean. Like the friggin', there we go. The password system in Castlevania was better than that. And the Castlevania games were mean, some of them. So here's where another thing gets interesting. So you see these little barrier things? So yeah, what happens is if you get too close to them, they activate and you can't go through them. So what you have to do to get through them is you have to use Luke's sort of sliding ability, which you get by holding down in a direction and pushing the jump button. The problem is you have to, I've done it several times now, so I'm okay at it, but the problem is that you have to, see, there's one of the jumps right there. See, I knew that jump, but if I didn't, I would have been completely boned for no good reason. And the problem is you have to, there's also these really cheap enemies here. The problem is you have to know exactly where to slide if you want to get through that puzzle. So if you slide too early, you'll run into the platform and get killed. And look how far back it took me. If you get even to the boss in this level and die, you have to come all the way back here. Oh, and by the way, you lose all your gun upgrades. And you'll never get them that quickly enough. So, yeah, now I get to do the whole thing again with less offensive capability. Fun, right? Yeah. And you may see what's going on here. So you have to slide through this thing, but if you don't slide at the exact right place, you'll take damage and get screwed by it. So if you slide too early, the thing will activate before you can get through it, you take damage. If you get too close to it and attempt to slide too quickly, you'll end up getting... basically bouncing off of it, and you'll also get screwed. Again, petty, cheap, and frustrating. And given the kind of mushy response of the controls, especially on the PlayStation 4 controller, whether you're playing with the analog stick or the D-pad, that is extra frustrating. It's It's petty platformer design, which was not uncommon, especially in this era, but that doesn't mean that it was good either then or now. So I certainly see the reverence people have for this game, but in a modern context, this just doesn't feel, like I said, this feels, it feels petty and cheap, to be frank with you. I mean, it is possible, if you're really good at it, it is possible to really excel at this game. I mean, there are people who've done speedruns of this, so it's definitely possible, but it's just extra frustrating for no real good reason, and I'm not so big on that. So, all right, so you've seen enough of that. So here you go. You got your save and your load function. Like a lot of games like this, there is only one save slot. I don't know why they do that. I cannot think of a technical limitation that would be the reason for that, but nonetheless, that's what happened. So here we are. So I have the plasma gun now, which is the highest end gun, and this is at the end of that sandcrawler level right before the boss. Oh yeah, by the way, this is the bit I was talking about at the bottom. That sand there is insta-death, and you're going to see how cheap this boss battle is when I get to that point. So yeah, having multiple save slots would have been cool. Yeah. So you see what I mean about mushy controls. I pressed the button in plenty of time there, and it didn't jump. So that's frustrating. Also, the save-in loads take a remarkably long time for something that's just a ROM. I'm not sure why that's the case, but multiple save slots would have been nice, especially for people who are practicing for speedruns, but, you know, it's still nice that it's here, and it obviously makes this game far less... Oh my god. It obviously makes this game far less cruel than it otherwise would have been. Also, the PlayStation 4 version... I don't know why he's not jumping there. He's just refusing to. Also, the PlayStation 4 version of this does have trophies in it, which is nice. No platinum, but it does have trophies. They run the gamut. I don't know why he's jumping so high. Oh, he actually survived that for some reason. So you'll see this. So yeah, you see I have to fight this monster on basically one platform. And yeah, anytime one of his things hit me, they not only hurt me, they push me back. So you have to make sure that you don't end up landing in the death sand. Now, because I have the highest gun, this fight is actually pretty easy. But in other situations, not so much. So, you kind of get the idea. And here's the end. There's R2. Alright, we're done this one. So you get another little interesting little cutscene here. Things like that. Yeah, so the trophies in this are okay. Some of them are not too bad. Some of them are downright insane. Like, the only gold trophy in this game is beat it on the highest difficulty without ever dying. There's only, needless to say, a handful of people who've ever done that. That is a very tall order indeed. But as you can see here, we're in a new level, and what I do like is that the levels not only are quite a bit different in terms of their platforming, even if they are mean, they have a lot of different enemies. So every level that I've played so far has different enemies in it, which is cool. You don't see that in every game. Even every platformer, and having multiple enemies is designs, you know, that took actual work, and it's cool that you do have that variety, and I think that's another reason that this is well regarded. Like, I definitely see what people dig about this game, I really do, but it's just, in a modern context, it's so frustrating, and it's so difficult because it's cheap, not because it's necessary. It is well designed, but that's not what makes it challenging. It's challenging because it's cheap and mean, and I don't like games that are designed around that way. That's an arcade mentality held over from back when games were designed to try to take quarters from people. And to be fair, Sculptured Software's one of their main bags as a company was doing arcade conversions, so they probably definitely shared that idea and that design philosophy, which is fine. I would just say know what you're getting into before this. I see why this is considered a very good Star Wars game, but if you're not someone who really likes tough games, you're gonna find this frustrating, and you probably won't play it very long, and you'll probably feel ripped off by it. I'll be honest with you, $10 for this game is kind of... See, there's another thing right there. I had to slide under that, but because I messed it up, I got crushed by it. But it looks like a checkpointed me past it, actually, which is kind of cool. Yeah, the price on this is also ridiculous. $10 for one of these games, I think, is way too much. $10 for all three of them, I think, would have actually been a pretty good value. I suspect that since Code Mystic's already put in the work to do the conversion on this game, there will be... the other two probably will come out at some point, because they all ran on the same tech. So, I mean, that they've converted one means converting another one would be pretty easy. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do see them coming later, maybe depending on how well this sells. Maybe that's Disney's idea with it. I mean, Disney is, well, Disney's many attempts at video games have generally been a mess because Disney doesn't know how to video game generally. But maybe that's the case with this. But I personally would have liked to have seen all 3 games for $10. I think that would be a good value. But right now, you have one game that is priced worse than Wii and Wii U Virtual Console pricing, which is already ridiculous. And it has basically the same features as a Wii Virtual Console conversion, which is better than it could be, but definitely far from the best out there. You know, compared to a Capcom arcade cabinet or something like that, or even Arcade Archives, which is also on the PlayStation 4, the feature set in this is lacking. And yeah, for $10, you probably... For $10, you either should expect more in that regard, or you should expect a really, really kick-ass game. And some people may think that. If you have the fond memories for this, that may be worth it for you. For me, $10 for a Super Nintendo game that is a very good movie game and has very impressive production values is not worth a game that's also just cheap and mean, and a game that makes me feel like it doesn't respect my time and effort as a player, which is really what this one does. Well, I boned that one up. So the checkpoints in this level seem to be a little more fair, but they're still kind of ridiculous. So yeah, so that is Super Star Wars, originally developed by Sculptured Software and converted for the PlayStation 4 by Codemystics and published by Lucasfilm/Disney in 2015. This is actually on the original Wii Virtual Console as well if you want to play it there, and it actually would be a little less expensive there. It's not the Wii U Virtual Console, sadly, but you can access the Wii Virtual Console on there as well. And of course, it's also available on the Super Nintendo, along with Super Empire Strikes Back and Super Return of the Jedi, which, as I understand it, are also good games and very similar to this one in that they're kind of cruel and mean. Yeah, I don't know. I think this is a little bit much to ask unless you're really either into Star Wars or really into these kind of games. But if you are, then it might be cool. Otherwise, I might either wait for a price drop or wait until they maybe put out a collection of all 3. But this game will challenge you, but I see what's cool about it. My name is Parallax Abstraction. Thank you all very much for watching. If you liked what you saw here, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. That does help me out a great deal. And of course, with the rest of the internet, if you spoil episode 7 in the comments, I will ban your ass and probably send a hit squad after you. But, you know, standard internet rules and whatnot. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. May the Force be with you. Take it easy.